All right. Well, I am super excited for this one, as I am just about every episode. But the gentleman that I have here as a guest today is Mr. Tony Hoty. And so I'll introduce Tony here in just a second. But just kind of give the listeners and the viewers here some backstory on Tony and I. We're both in this Facebook group, and Tony had made a post in there about um, giving his customers a gift in exchange for business or allowing them to do a demo. And I had reached out to Tony via just a direct message on Facebook and said, "Hey, I think I might have something that could help you guys." And so that's really where this relationship started. And then we've been on like a fast track or a fast forward button here, if you will, and have spent some time together. I was fortunate enough to be in Tony's office here recently, spent time in one of his company meetings. I gotta tell you, man, like super inspirational. I loved your entire slide deck, the whole expo diploma thing. We can kind of get into that today. But Tony Hoty, welcome to Coffee with Coleman, man. I'm super excited to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So let's learn a little bit about you, man. You got a heck of a story. You've been in the consulting world. You run Bath and Window Expo up in the Cleveland, Ohio market. Let's just kind of hear a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I started out as a door-to-door canvasser. I got a part-time job in college that was supposed to be for beer money, but I fell in love with direct sales and stuck around with that company in the home improvement space for a number of years, working as a door-to-door canvasser, also working live home shows, events, fairs, festivals. We had some kiosks inside of retail stores, big box stores, and sat in the call center a little bit, and then ultimately did sell in the home. So got a real well-rounded experience. It's kind of more of the college of hard knocks. I didn't learn a whole lot in the classroom at Ohio State, but I got a home improvement PhD.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that stuck out in the short time that we've gotten to know each other, the one thing that sticks out to me, and this stuck out to me a lot at dinner and just asking you a series of questions, like you just have so much excitement around what you do and your team. And I think that is something that, I don't know how you replace that, right? And like what keeps you going now? I've got to ask because I sat in your company meeting the other day, and I could just tell the level of excitement in your voice and tonality and things like that. Like you're super passionate about this business. What's got you here, man?
Yeah, I got a fire in my belly, man. I always have to some degree or another, to wake up and get after it. I read something a long time ago that kind of resonated with me. It said, something to the effect of, if a lion in the jungle is not fast enough to catch the slowest gazelle, there's a problem. And if the gazelle isn't fast enough to outrun, the slowest lion, then there's a problem. And the
Yeah,
moral of the story there is that, whether you're a lion or whether you're a gazelle, when the sun comes up, you better be running. And
yeah,
I think that to me, that just means that, you have to be passionate. You have to be wake up with, some fire in your belly to get after it, whatever it is that you do. I don't care what your career is. I think you have to, you know, get up and be fired up. You
yeah.
should be fired with enthusiasm or fired with
I
enthusiasm.
I put in here yesterday. There were we were going through this company meeting, and sorry, I'm going to get started here and kind of jump all over the place. But you said something that I honestly wrote down, and you were talking about the acronym of LFG, and we all know what it stands for. Let's fucking go, right? And you were challenging your team to think about it in a different context about let's fucking grow. And I thought that that was special. So much so that I wrote this next thing down that says the people that don't want to grow, they don't want to sharpen the skills to pay the bills. And, if you back up and you shared another slide, and I hope you're okay with me going through this, you shared your report card from your grade school days. And it's funny that you did that because my wife and I are in this conversation right now within the four walls of our home about my oldest just not being good at school. And how he needs to get good grades and it's his responsibility and all this stuff. And it's like the circle of life, right? Smacking me right in the face with my oldest son. I sucked at school as well, and my report card looked a lot like yours. I just so much so like would take the report card and put it down the sewer drains on the road
Yeah.
back in Indiana so my parents wouldn't see it. But I want to go back to this like sharpening skills to pay the bills. Like, what do you think is required for somebody that's in your line of work, that's knocking doors, that's going to home shows, that's doing retail, and they're setting demos to calling on leads and going in households every night? Like, what do you think the number one thing or the top three things are for people to sharpen their skills to get really good at this trade?
Yeah, I think there's never been a bigger opportunity for us to, you know, work on personal and professional development.
Mhm.
Continually working on ourselves, our personal character, as well as, professional skills, both. And, that can come from a variety of different channels, everything from, taking classes, from getting involved in workshops, from training with, superiors at your business, or training with friends of yours in the business that you can learn from, peers, networking groups. There's webinars, there's podcasts, there's seminars and conferences. There's just so much content out there. A friend of mine once said, that the, the greatest things in life are on the top shelf, and the only way you'll ever reach them is by standing on the books you've read. There's just so much knowledge in a book. Sometimes it's someone's life's work, and you can kind of get a cheat code to their entire life's work by looking at their biography, and digesting that. And they're all puzzle pieces, and that's what I think we're all doing as we go through life, trying to put those puzzle pieces together, get a little better every day.
43-year-old man, and I will be honest with you, is still trying to put the puzzle pieces together. And I share this experience a lot with my kids and my wife. Is like, I always look at the end result. Like, what am I trying to achieve? What am I trying to achieve? And I don't know if you've ever seen the speech by Matthew McConaughey, and he talks about, I look forward to three things in my life, like where I'm going, what I'm chasing, and I forget the third one. But the idea and the moral of the story is that he's never going to get there. And so once he feels like he's arrived, like what he's found in life is like he finds the satisfaction in the journey. And I think
Yeah.
that that's what we're all on, right? Is this journey of life, and have we ever reached the result that we're trying to achieve? Super cool. And I appreciate us getting philosophical there for a second. Um, Listen, lead generation is kind of what you do. So much so that one of the things I committed to was becoming a part of your Lead Gen Expo. Talk to me a little bit about your consulting work, what your, I guess, what you feel like your personal responsibility is to the in-home direct sales organizations throughout the country, and talk to everybody a little bit about this Lead Gen Expo that you guys put on.
Yeah, so I'm super excited about that. That's June 10th and 11th in Cleveland. We do it every year. I think this will be my 15th year hosting a conference on lead generation. And so, my background and expertise, my entire career has been spent really focusing on bringing consumers into the market who were not actively shopping. They were sitting at home, they get a knock on the door, and we pull them into the market through a conversation that uncovers wants and needs, right? Same thing, when at a fair or a festival, they didn't go to the popcorn festival or the pumpkin festival, shopping for home improvement, but we found a way to engage them, get them into the booth, and get a conversation going where we uncovered some needs, and we pulled someone into the market that wasn't actively shopping. That's been my expertise, and it's my mission in life to continue to help people do that, because it's an infinite market. We can never get to all those consumers that are out there. And having those skills to be able to pull someone into the market that isn't actively shopping really is, giving you the rod instead of the fish, so to speak. A lot of most businesses are focused on consumers who are actively shopping. And,
Yeah.
I've aligned myself with a lot of really good people who are great at digital marketing and TV and radio and print and other AI. We've got Marcus Sheridan, who's an expert on, consumer search with AI, coming to Lead Gen Expo. So we align ourselves with people on both sides of the spectrum, but it's definitely been my life's mission to help people, pulling people into the market.
Yeah. It's interesting. You talk about, you were speaking of this the other day in regards to, um, most people do really focus on the people that are in the market, and there's a whole infinite world of people out there that are just not shopping. And, our job is to uncover their needs, wants, and desires. Talk to me a little bit about that, right? So lead generation happens, and that's really kind of what you're passionate about, obviously in the trade business and in-home remodeling industry. But talking about salespeople specifically, because this podcast really focuses on three things, and we're going to get into all those today, which is sales mastery, operational, and leadership mastery. And I think those are the three components or the ingredients that make the cake of, a successful business. And I wanted to talk to you though, like as a salesperson, you go on a demo or you go on a lead, right? You run a lead and you get into the home. And oftentimes, like there's this resistance that comes from the homeowner, right? We've all been there if you've been in the sales seat. But what separates an average salesperson from someone that just absolutely becomes elite in direct sales?
Yeah, I think it really does start with a servant's heart, someone that is really not focused on their own personal needs and, desires of, I need to make this sale. I need the income. I need the result. I think it's more staying focused on the consumer and finding out, uncovering their wants, their needs. And, I used to say all the time, before you can charm them, you must first disarm them. And
Mm,
I really believe that people are very guarded when they're in a sales scenario. When they are, meeting a new salesperson for the first time, their gloves are up. They are expecting to be pushed. They're expecting, um, you know, the worst because they want to prepare for the worst and hope for the best, right?
yeah.
So it's our job as salespeople to really bring that guard down, disarm them, and make it okay to tell the truth. If the average consumer would be more than comfortable telling a friend or family member, yeah, I need a new roof. Yeah, the water quality in our house stinks and I'd love to get it, upgraded.
Right.
Love to, transform the bathroom. They'd be happy sharing that openly. But you put a salesperson in front of them with an agenda, and they're going to now hold that, information back. So
Yeah, that's good. So let's go back into, we're in the home and maybe I'm a sales rep for Window and Bath Expo. What do you think is the number one skill that I would need to become super successful in your business?
as a salesperson,
Yeah.
yeah, so discipline is a big part of it. Consistency and discipline. You have to get in the training room and master your craft. You mentioned it earlier, sales mastery. What we see is that we introduce a proven process to people, a very proven, long track record of getting great results for people, and they want to fix it. They go on two or three sales calls and they say, that didn't work for me. I'm going to go back to the drawing board and tinker with the process. You should never tinker with the process until you've perfected it, especially if it's a proven process and gotten great results for other people. I always say, work it to perfection before you go a new direction. And way too often people are pivoting and changing course and changing gears, and we have all these kind of phrases that we use that really speak to a lack of discipline and consistency.
Yeah, it's interesting. I started in sales in 2012 and it was in the real estate industry. And you and I were talking about this over dinner the other night. But one of the things that I was like calling on internet leads, right? So a lot of PPC pay-per-click for the you guys who are not listening, would generate leads. And I'd call on these people. Hi, my name's Josh Coleman with ABC Realty. And the reason I was calling is I know you were looking at a home and on 123 Main Street. Are you guys looking to buy or sell in the next 3 months? And I got so darn good at the script that it just became second nature. And I think that really leans into what you were just mentioning is the discipline to learn your skill is oftentimes overlooked by many salespeople. And so, when let's just talk about close rates for a second, because I think that this is the one thing that most sales organizations struggle with. You have guys that are at the top, right? They're closing 30, or excuse me, 40, 50, 60%. And then you have some of the bottom feeders at the bottom. What do you believe? And this is a loaded question. I know where you're going to go with this. The people that are closing less than average, what do you think is the discipline required? What are the things they have to stay disciplined around to get to the next level in their career?
Yeah, I think that, discipline in mastering the process allows you to focus on your customer. When you don't have it down pat, right? When you're a new driver, you're looking at all your different gauges. You're looking at the speedometer. You're looking at all over the place, right? Whereas when you're an experienced driver, you can text, you can talk on the phone, and you can still get to your destination. Sometimes you wonder, geez, how in the heck did I get here? I was so engrossed in the conversation on my way here. I can't believe I've arrived already. But that's how you should be as a salesperson. You should be so focused, hyper focused on the consumer, what their wants, needs are, what the outcome is. And if you don't have, your sales process mastered, you can't do that. It goes back to the levels of learning, being a conscious competent, right? Being so good at something, you can be a conscious incompetent, not even knowing that you're doing things at a high level.
Yeah, that's awesome. I noticed a book on that was one of your team members that they had a three ring binder and it was under some of the other, stuff they had. And it was this uh, leadership through the lens of EOS. And so I want to talk about EOS for a second. EOS is something that is near and dear to my heart. You can probably see with the books behind me that I've completely engaged myself in EOS. Um, is it something you guys have implemented? And if so, like, what has your experience been with it?
Yes, great question. So, yes, we are currently in the process of implementing EOS fully. We started to self implement several years ago. We did not hire an EOS integrator at that time because we didn't have our organizational chart fully complete. And once we got to that point where we had, a GM, we had a manager of every single department, we knew it was time to go all in and hire an integrator, a professional to help us with it. And we did a decent job leading up to that point. But having someone that does it every day come into your organization and notice your tendency to veer off path is invaluable. And it's that same thing that we discussed. I mean, we want to follow that process to a T before we make any tweaks. Too many organizations do it the other way around. Is we're gonna modify it so it works better for us. You got to work it to perfection first.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you guys have been in implementation of EOS. How long have you been doing it?
Just a couple months now.
Okay, great. Have you seen results from it yet?
What we've seen so far is just tremendous clarity amongst our leadership team regarding what our rocks are, what's important to us, what our top priorities are, who's their direct support, right? The organizational chart is much more clear as far as who reports to who and who's accountable to who, and how the structure of our weekly meetings is level 10 now to if you understand that pun.
Yeah, I totally understand it. The bad thing in our organization, we run everything off of a platform called 90.io, and 90 is my EOS one if you guys run off that. And uh, we had our first L10 that got 10 across the board as everybody in the meeting graded it. and it was the one that I was not in and the one that I was not running. So it was like a look in the mirror type of scenario, like, holy smokes, how did this happen? And we have this Teams channel within our organization called Catch Someone. And Catch Someone just seems like, if Tony's part of the team, I, catch him doing something that, fits with our core values or our mission or our culture or whatever, and I catch him, right? Like, hey, I just want to give a shout out. He did this. And so they did that, and it was like a smack in the face, but that's pretty good. Um, I got to assume you're the visionary.
True story.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, look, you got a lot of things up your sleeve, and I think you're a wealth of knowledge to share. A lot of kind of things you want to implement in life and in business, and your mind steers in directions that is always about like maximizing something. What, where's Window and Bath Expo going? Like, what are your goals there?
yeah, we really want to grow that organization to hundreds of millions of dollars, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we feel that we can, grow it at scale, not just locally, but, in our state and, perhaps beyond the state of Ohio and throughout the Midwest and beyond. So we're excited about that. We have a unique concept that is innovative and it's different and it gives us the ability to expand pretty quickly.
Yeah. You guys did a thing yesterday inside in your company huddle, and it was about the Expo diploma, and you can get into it if you want, but it was really interesting. What I thought was a gentleman that was going to sit in the sales room with us after the company meeting was not the gentleman that sat in the sales room, and now I can see why. I understood the character of the guy. Um, but he recited the core values, he recited the vision statement, he recited your four H's, he did his true or false thing. I think you call it the 12 or something like that. Um, but really, like, as a leader of your organization, like, what do you think the biggest lesson in leadership's been for you that you've learned over the years and that you try to hand down to your team?
Yeah, the culture is really important. That's something that we definitely try to pass that on through the ranks that, we have to be aligned as an organization and we have to have people who have the same types of core values so that we can get along and share a common set of values and common vision. And so, if you have someone in the organization that's a high performer, but they're not easy to get along with. They're disruptive. They're difficult. That just doesn't fit our culture because we're not going to remain aligned. It's too disruptive to the business. So that's something we've definitely tried to um, instill in everyone in the group.
Yeah. Talking about core values and how you've implemented, like, what's the one core value that's given you kind of the guiding light inside your organization? Like, what's the one that resonates with you the most?
Wow, well, we got seven core values, and they're all important. I think integrity is something that has it's so all encompassing in a lot of ways. If I can only pick one, that
Yeah.
would be it because it speaks to honesty, transparency, and just being a good human.
Yeah, I love that. What's the biggest, or let me back up here for a second. So, earlier in your career, man, you've been at this for quite some time, right? Like, how do you personally define success today compared to how you defined it earlier in your career?
Yeah, I think in the past I defined it more with achievements and monetary goals and things of that nature, and now it's more about impact. It's about personal development. Am I getting better every day? Am I a better teammate? Am I supporting my organization better? Am I better in my relationships with others? So that's really how it's evolved.
Um, going like back into the direct sales businesses, I'm assuming you've been through some economic climates that haven't been so favorable, right? I think it probably goes without saying. But how do you believe companies like you, especially in the direct sales world, stay consistent through these economic climates and these seasons that kind of present themselves based on whatever the political environment, the economic climate, whatever it is? Like, how do you feel like a company like yours can truly stay consistent during those times?
I think you have to have some form of active lead generation, proactive lead generation in your marketing mix if you're going to stay consistent. Otherwise, you're too dependent on outside factors. When something happens in the news, whether it's something drastic like a terrorist attack or something more minor like a government shutdown, these kinds of things can have an impact on consumers' confidence, right? And so the phone just doesn't ring, the website doesn't get the inquiries that you hope that it would, and so you're now a victim of circumstance. When you're out there proactively generating leads, uh, you're able to do that regardless of time of year, regardless of economic factors. So I think that's the biggest staple in maintaining consistency in a direct sales organization.
I was just looking at some of the pictures I took from the company me. I keep going back to this thing because I was just, I came into it probably midstream, and you were in the process of doing your thing. Quite a bit of lead sources, right? So you guys were looking at April numbers. We don't need to get into the numbers, but how many lead sources do you actively target on a given month or a period of time?
Yeah, so it's north of 20. It's usually close to 30 lead sources that different lead aggregation, is one channel, but we are out there knocking on doors. That's a channel. We have several retail store showrooms where we're generating leads, in Walmarts and other big box stores. Lots of different types of fairs, festivals, and expos and things like that that contribute to the mix. And then, of course, we have some traditional stuff like Google, pay-per-click. We have, print advertising in coupon clipper magazines and, showroom traffic. So
Yeah.
quite a bit of variety there.
I will give kudos to your team, man. I went to one of your showrooms, and the sign on the door says text, first name last name to this text message, and I am kid you not. I get inside there, and I'm like, holy smokes, I've never been in one of these, and sure enough, my phone rings. Hi, this is, I don't know the name, but I was calling you from Window and Bath Expo. I noticed that you just gained access to the showroom there in whatever city I was in, and they went through a heck of a script. So kudos to you and your team for following up and doing the right thing. I want to go back the industry as a whole, the remodeling industry as a whole. Like, what are some of the biggest mistakes companies make whenever it comes to generating leads? This may be they're not diversified enough, they don't know how to do it. Like, and then the next question to that, like the subset of that question is, how did you get so good at diversifying your leads? So what are the mistakes that you see companies making, and then kind of where did you learn to diversify yourself?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because, I started out going door to door. That was the only way I knew how to make a lead. And I think most people will admit it's one of the most difficult ways to make a lead when you're unfamiliar with how to go about it. And when you start with the most difficult method of generating leads, everything else seems to
Right,
be
right.
downhill, right? It's like
Yeah.
skiing downhill from that point.
Yeah.
But you realize that there is quite a bit of nuance to it because when new people try to do it, people who have never done it before, they stumble and fall and they struggle with it. And it teaches you that wow, these nuances are important. These tiny disciplines that seem to be unimportant are super important. And so it helps you when you get into that next lead source to look for those nuances, look for how you handle the lead, look for, how you speak to customers in those interactions. And so, that made a big difference.
You have a consulting company, TonyHoty.com. For those of you guys that are listening or watching, TonyHoty.com, there's a wealth of knowledge on there. He'll talk about Lead Gen Expo and that sort of thing. But you've helped countless companies or people improve their results. What's the most rewarding part about watching somebody succeed that you've helped?
Oh, it's that is the greatest joy, believe it or not. We as trainers, we are in a thread together, the Tony Hoty organization of trainers. And, when we get results from a client that has had a big win, I mean, we're over the moon. I mean, you just know that it's going to be the gift that keeps on giving. When you teach someone how to embark on a new lead source that they have finally, it's clicked for them. They're going to be able to stick with this program, and it's going to create fruit for them for a long time coming. The end result of that is going to be phenomenal, the impact, and so it's hard to put into words, but that's really the compensation. We'll take the money. The money's good, but the ultimate compensation is the impact. Yeah.
You and I talked a lot about abundance mindset and giving back and doing our best to improve others around us and things like that. And I think that's why, I'm passionate about doing things like this and talking with people like yourselves, because I've learned through so many people like you, and I've just become a vessel to be able to share that with others, whether it's in my own organization or with people that I cross paths with. Like, from an abundance mindset standpoint, like, why did TonyHoty.com and the consulting gig ever come to, how did it ever get birthed?
They say that new things like that happen as a result of inspiration and or desperation, right? For
Uh-huh.
me, the truth is it was desperation. I started a remodeling business at a very young age at 23. I built it up pretty quickly on the lead generation principles that I had learned. But I found that, skills alone was not enough. My character was weak at that point in my life. And when the first storm came around, in my case, it was, kind of the 2008 kind of storm that came around. I didn't have the character to weather the storm. And, that business came toppling over, and I had no choice without any financial resources or any credit at that point to, I had to go out and do what I knew how to do, which was go door to door and train others on how to go door to door. And I had to do it for other organizations. And luckily for me, with the economic climate being in a tough time, they needed that. And so my skill set was really ideal for a lot of organizations that were feeling the pain. But I refined my skills during that time. I rebuilt my finances and credit, and have been able to take another swing at things.
Yeah, that's awesome. Looking ahead in the industry as a whole, and what you see from your consulting practice and what you see in the day-to-day business of Window and Bath Expo, where do you think lead generation and direct sales are headed over the next 5 to 10 years?
It's going to be different. I
Yeah.
promise you that. We look at you saw firsthand how we conduct kind of a monthly review during our monthly meetings with our team. And, when I look at last year's lead sources compared to this year's lead sources, they're very different. There's several new lead sources on the board because we've had to get creative. We've had to adapt and evolve. And I think AI is going to be a big factor in things. Consumer search, going to ChatGPT and Grok and all these other channels to learn who is really the best choice for my project, and that's going to change the game. So that will be a big part of it. Some of the fundamentals will stay the same, but there's going to be a lot of new dynamics in the mix.
So interesting you say that. And one of the things that I've just learned about you in the short amount of time we've got to know one another is that you always stay on the forefront of this, or, I think that this is what probably you're super passionate about. Would that be right?
Yeah, I'm definitely passionate about staying ahead of the curve and kind of sharing what I've learned with others. I love to go first and report back to the industry that has been so good to me.
Yeah, that's great. So we're gonna get into rapid fire real quick before we close this thing out. This podcast is really built around the three pillars that I spoke of earlier: sales, operation, and leadership mastery. I think it's, again, the ingredients that build the cake of business. If you had to pick one, the one most important out of the three, would it be sales, operations, or leadership? What's most important to you, and why?
No question, leadership.
Okay.
Everything rises and falls on leadership, says John Maxwell, and he is correct. And the reason I say that is I've seen it firsthand. We get calls every day. Tony, we've got a lead generation problem. Well, we do some discovery, we stick our head in there and we find out, it's not so much a lead generation problem as much as it's a leadership problem. We hear that they got a recruiting problem. We start to do some discovery and stick our head up in there and find out, not much of a recruiting problem. It's more of a leadership problem. You
Yeah.
know, you can go on and on with every category within the business. It's impacted by a lack of leadership or by the presence of leadership. So that would be number one.
That's interesting. Let's talk about sales mastery real quick. If you had to define sales mastery, what does sales mastery mean to Tony Hoty?
It's about discipline. It's about defining a proven process and having the discipline and consistency to execute on it. Oftentimes, we see these organizations that want to just send bids out for their proposals out, email them or leave them hanging on the door, or give a price and run without having conversations. The reason they want to do that is not because they feel that's the modern pressure-free way of doing business. They want to do that because it doesn't require discipline. It doesn't require that, the consistency and that's the truth.
Yeah. I think oftentimes too, it goes back to what you said, right? Like it's the easy way out, hanging the quote on the door or emailing it. And I oftentimes tell my team, like, listen, like sometimes you got to run towards a conflict. That's where the most growth happens. And when you do that, it's funny to watch these people. It's not funny. I shouldn't say it that way. It's inspirational and it's encouraging to watch people grow when they run towards it. And for salespeople in general, I think we're so afraid of the word no or the rejection that we don't want to make the phone call. We don't want to have the conversation with the customer because we want this thing hanging out there because we think it's in our pipeline and it must be warm or hot. So that's interesting. Operational mastery. We talked a little bit about EOS in the last 30, 40 minutes here. What's operational mean to Tony? And talk about it through the lens of what you said and where you want Window and Bath Expo to go, which is hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, what does operational mastery mean to you?
It's an ecosystem of systems. It's a system of systems, right? You have to have a system for lead generation, where the business is coming from, a system for sales, how you convert those leads effectively, right? And then you have to have your operational systems on how you get that revenue. You turn those deposits into final payments, right? Because without getting out there and installing and completing those projects, and you have to do it all over again because doing it once isn't enough. So you have to have a high level of customer satisfaction. That's where the operational excellence comes in. It can't just be average. It's got to be a great customer experience so that you can sell them something else, so that you can get a referral from them, so that you can get a review from them, and continue to perpetuate your company into the future.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up a lot of the systems and processes. And one thing I know about you, and you showed me this over the course of the last couple of weeks, is you build those processes and those systems to support the rest of your team. And I think, it's a testament to see the people that I spent time with in your organization, how engaged they are within the organization and how passionate enough they are to be there. So much so that the gentleman that was standing up in front of the entire company and reciting the core values and things, the last question on his true false question was, is this the best black shirt that I've ever worn? And I don't know if he said it exactly like that, but it was a black golf polo and it had Bath and Window Expo on it. And it was a true or false question. And when he got to that thing and he was answering it because they were grading, who got so many right and who got so many wrong, he said, if anybody answered this false, we got a problem because this is absolutely the best black shirt that I've ever worn. And I think that's a testament to you and your leadership. So kudos to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, he said this is the black shirt the most proud that I've ever been to wear, I guess, or something to that effect. Yeah, but that was cool.
It knows, and I've had those experiences as a leader too, and that's really what sets the soul on fire, right? It's like those little things, like most people would think, ah, that doesn't mean a lot, but somebody that sits in a leadership team or a leadership seat or an ownership seat, such as yourself, those are the little things that you're doing the right thing whenever those things happen. So, Tony, first of all, just let the audience know, man, how they find you. Where can
I got
they?
one of those unique names. It's Tony Hoty, Tonyhoty. You can Google me. You can find the website and find a million ways to get a hold of me on it, social media. So look forward to hearing from you.
This guy's full of abundance, guys. I reached out to him on a Facebook channel. Tony and I didn't know each other from, did not know one another, and we struck a conversation up, and here we are today. So, Tony, I appreciate your time, sir. It's been great to get to know you, spend a little bit of time with your team, and I look forward to the future and how we grow together.
Yeah, likewise, man. Thanks.
All right, take care.